My name's Dave Robertson. I'm an outdoor writer based in Calgary, and the kind folks at SkiUphill allow me to host these monthly Snowpack meetings. In a moment, I'm going to pass us over to our host, Kevin Hjertaas with MTN Guiding. But first, just want to say a quick thank you to SkiUphill, which will soon be coming run uphill, of course, with the season change. So make sure to go down and visit Joël and everyone as you
It's
get
the
prepared for
endless
your training
winter
season.
here this
I'm
year.
sorry?
It's the endless spring now this year. Like it just will not end. Right, but it's definitely
Hey,
like full on skiing here.
yeah, Joel, Gavin was also telling me a little bit about some other stuff you're doing at the store too, which actually involves physiotherapy and massage. Do you want to say a couple of words before we get started?
Yeah, well, those who have been into the shop the last 3 weeks, it's big now. We have space. It's not like we're all like walking on top of each other constantly, like trying to like sneak around people and stuff. So now we're triple the size, and we also will have a massage therapist working out of the back and some physio as well in the next couple weeks. So we're kind of waiting for some equipment to arrive, but that's kind of the last bit. So right now we have a nice big shop. We have a tech space where people can get a lot more stuff done much quicker, turnaround as well. And then we have a physio in the back. And then, spoiler alert, next year we'll have probably beer, cider on tap, coffee machine in the front, like full on après ski setup. But yeah, right now it's the kind of big piece that's coming in the next couple of weeks. We'll be able to have, massage therapy and physio out of a nice little back room. So just in time for all the running injuries from going back to running.
That's great to hear. Sorry, Joel, I realized I had myself spotlighted, but I didn't have you on there. So we can see a little bit of the shop back there. That's your new workspace, isn't it?
Yeah, new workspace. Tons more space. Period. Right. Those who have been in, I've like all been like, wow, what's this new place now? And a lot more light and a lot nicer to work in, and hopefully less chaos. But we'll see.
Excellent. Well, I for one will miss the chaos. Hey, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you want to introduce who's on with us tonight?
Yeah, you bet, Dave. Thanks. Love to. For those of you that haven't been joining these talks every month, let me introduce what we got going on. We're going to start with talking to Marcus Baranow in a few minutes here. Hey, Marcus. Marcus is a guidebook author from the Rockies here. So most of you probably already own his books. He's our man when it comes to beta, and the guy who's been getting out a lot, although he's slightly injured right now. We'll be talking to him about some of the ski destinations and what's been getting skied, what's looking good for this weekend. And then we're going to bounce over to Zoe Ryan is an Avalanche technician up at Sunshine Village, and she's been helping us out with these all year. She's going to bring us up to date what's happened on the snowpack the last month since we last talked, where the snowpack's at right now, what our concerns are, and then we'll talk a little bit about how that's going to go forward into the classic Rockies spring snowpack. And at that point, we'll bounce back to Marcus to see what that means, where we should all be going skiing and what the usual objectives are in spring. And we'll have Joël bounce back in too at some points to talk about, what people around the shop have been saying and what people have been skiing and doing, and kind of keep going back and forth that way. But for everyone watching, though, we love questions. It really helps us focus on what you guys want and sort of steer the conversation. So by all means, throw them in the chat. You can direct message Dave if you don't want to throw it in the public chat, or just put your name in there and we can come back to you, or just write your question in there. However you feel most comfortable. We'll
maybe sorry, Kevin, maybe even if some people have observations, like lots of people have been going on like Hjertaas and all that stuff with the different entrances and exits. Maybe some people have some pretty fresh info for us.
Yeah, good point. Actually, that'll be we'll definitely want all that. We'll be milking you guys. When we used to do these live last year and the years past, we'd walk around at intermission to try and get everyone's beta. So we'll have to pull it out of you virtually this way.
Hey, Kevin, I have a question. So who are those people in the car? That's what I want to know. Can the people in the car just say hi and like tell us where you're going.
Oh, in the
Oh,
Just
blowing in.
efficiency, yeah.
You have to take it off mute though, unless it's really loud in the car. I can see her mouth moving, but she's not saying anything. We'll come back to them later. We'll find out. They got to come up with a really good story about where they're going.
Those guys are from Quebec City, actually. I've been going around the classics with them all week. They're just friends of mine who didn't have a winter out east this winter. So if you like, we've been skiing, you know, all the kind of nice long kind of chiller powder runs the last couple of days with them. So I told them to jump in to see what's up with the snow here.
Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. Though, you know, how's it look in the back seat? Like, is it like full of chip bags and sleeping bags and things back there, or there's skis in there? Excellent. What do we think about the ski choice, Joël?
They're demos from the shop, so I will.
All right. Well, turn it back over to Kevin for some more serious business then.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we don't have any serious business, but I thought we'd probably start tonight by talking to Marcus. And Marcus, let's maybe just see what you've been doing for the last month. You know, last time we talked was a month ago, and I think you had some big traverse plans that had fallen through then. So I don't think we knew what you were going to do. And so we can tie that into what everyone's been skiing. It's definitely changed. You know, the last month was different than January, February for where everyone's been going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my plans got changed. I was supposed to do a big traverse, but not. So recently I started to switch my focus over to, I'm just sharing my screen here. So I've been changing my focus over to try to finish some books. So after the last time that we chatted, I spent a lot of time in the Lost Horse Creek and Egypt Lake area. So here's a screenshot of Google Earth so it doesn't lag out on everyone. But if you're unfamiliar with these areas, you got sunshine. I hope that my screen is sharing. It is, or
Yeah, we can see that.
yeah, cool. So you got sunshine right here. This is Mount Bourgeon, and then Healy Creek Trail goes up this way to Healy Pass, and then you got Egypt Lake. It was skiing really great out there. I spent a couple of weeks, or yeah, about 3 weeks in total for me in this area. About mid-March, we spent a few days here at Egypt Lake, and yeah, the snow was absolutely perfect. It snowed quite a bit the night before we got there, and yeah, it was just all really great powder skiing, super great stability. We were just sort of skiing whatever we wanted in great conditions. The week prior to that, I was camping in the Lost Horse Creek area here, and same kind of thing. It was a little touchier. It was like starting to transition, and then so there's a little concerns, not too much, but it was great skiing. It was blue skies, and it was warm camping. If you are planning on going to Egypt Lake area, anyone listening, you definitely don't have the shelter this year. It's completely boarded up, screwed shut. Even if you want to try to break in, it would take quite a bit of effort. Not that I would condone that anyway, but so definitely it's camping right now. And then the other place, if my thing would work, oh, there we go. So I was spending a little bit of time with Corey Pass. So if you have one of my very old books, I do have Corey Pass in it. But right now I don't have anything currently available published on it, but it's super easy to get to. You go to Norquay, you wrap around Norquay going up 40 Mile, and then you start to go towards Edith Pass, but you just cut off and go up this drainage, end up in what's called Gargoyle Valley. And there's a whole bunch of really cool like couloirs there and chutes. There's this big east bowl off Corey. I skied from just below the summit down. It was super great snow, really great stability. Again, that was like maybe about 3 weeks ago. So I don't know if things probably have changed quite a bit. But for those looking to get close to Banff and not have to drive far, that's a great one. That's usually good until about early May. Most years it starts to get pretty bad. So if you want to go that way, soon is better than not. I haven't been skiing the bow range, but a lot of people have. So I see a lot of cars at Taylor every day when I drive by. That there's a sweet line that got skied by a group right off the summit of Bell, the east face. So nice steep line, a couple of rappels, so maybe not up everyone's alley. I know a group that went over Constellation Call and skied, or not Constellation Call, Mitre Call, and then skied the Eiffel North Couloir, and reportedly was pretty good. People are skiing a lot. Obviously, Surprise Pass, Victoria's seen some pretty wild descents. So yeah, a lot of skiing going on in the Lake Louise group and the bow range in general. A lot of people hitting up the Chickaboom Traverse. So that one goes from the Chickadee Valley side, just sort of goes just below Boom Glacier. And then a lot of people have been doing the loop. So they actually go, they go down the Chickaboom Traverse as described in the Chick Scott book. And then they sort of jump over the call. And then they might even, some of them have even gone back up Wimper and skied down towards the highway. So some pretty creative stuff going on in the bow range this year. And then, of course, starting to hear quite a few reports on the WAPTA. I haven't been keeping too close eye on that, but it seems like it's a lot of wind and there's some good skiing and there's some kind of open crevasses. There's been some pretty big events, avalanche events that have happened, which we'll talk about in a second here. So it seems sort of like more of a mixed bag than a normal early April, late March on the WAPTA maybe. But again, there's a little bit less traffic up there, so there's not as many reports I'm seeing anyways. So
yeah, I've been noticing that too. But this year, like, I mean, for those who haven't been paying attention, all the Alpine Club huts are quite tricky to book. Like,
yeah,
mostly not really doable for some. Everyone's camping up there, and then there's also some parking issues on the Sherbrooke Lake side that are slowing, some people down. So there just hasn't been as much action on the WAPTA as usual. But what I found interesting is that most of the reports I've seen have been people doing still the classic route, which I thought maybe without the huts being important, people would kind of be changing their plans. But it's as if they're doing just the standard WAPTA Traverse, but with tents.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard the way the hut situation was going to be, I was hoping there would be a little bit maybe more creativity, and maybe there is, and we're just not hearing about it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of camping up there as opposed to the lodges or the huts, just because it gives you a lot more freedom to move around and use the terrain a little bit more creatively, and you can usually get more skiing in that way too, right? So instead of just like being so focused on getting from Peyto to Bow and then Bow to Belfour, you can we can go up this way and camp here and ski down this way. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're looking to get on the WAPTA, or maybe throw away the old playbook and just sort of look at it with some fresh eyes if you're camping. Because there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do if you're not limiting yourself to like such a objective based sleeping arrangement, I guess.
Yeah, no, totally. And we will talk about some of those avalanche incidents with Zoe in a minute here, but yeah, anything else that you've been seeing out there or skiing?
Yeah, mostly what I've been doing is what I already listed. I've just spent a ton of time in those areas, the earlier areas I talked about, Corey Pass and Lost Horse. But I mean, people are still skiing. There's lots of reports skiing up in the 93 North, a little north of Peyto. There's lots of couloirs right from the road. Those seem to be getting skied pretty regularly. And then obviously all your classics, people are going up Observation. They're going, the Crowfoot Glades, Bow Peak. I know quite a few parties have been skiing Granddaddy Couloir, which is pretty typical for this time of year. Yeah. And, we are transitioning to that time of year where a lot of people start thinking about couloirs and steep skiing. I mean, with that as an objective, I mean, right now you're really, the cornices I've been seeing out there are super, super massive and like just barely hanging on. So if you are looking to get into steeper skiing, which most people are at this point of the game, you know, that's something definitely to look out for. We even had one, if you see my mouse right here, this is, it's technically not, it's an unnamed peak technically, but everyone calls it Scarab Peak, including Google Earth. And we were just skinning past it to go to Whistling Pass, and like a 2.5 was triggered. Like the cornice of the top just collapsed and the whole face went, and we just barely got dusted there. So it was like pretty, and it wasn't like a sunny day. It was warm, but I mean, they're just so massive right now, the ones I've seen. It's definitely something I'm pretty concerned about myself. And that seems to be pretty, if there's one thing that's consistent across the Rockies in this area, that seems to be it. Whereas the snow I've seen is a little less consistent. The cornices are big. That's pretty consistent.
That's a great segue for us to chat with Zoe about Snowpack. Thanks, Marcus.
No problem.
We'll come back and talk about some spring objectives. But yeah, Zoe, Marcus isn't the first one to mention. It's been a lot of wind this year, and that's led to the Alpine looking a little scrappier than usual, but also the cornices being huge. And is that what's causing most of the bigger avalanches these days, is cornices?
Yeah, for sure. Like over the past 7 days or so, there's been a couple of good reports. I'm just going to bring up my screen as well here and kind of show you guys a little bit. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, cool. So this is just a good picture of the French Hag Traverse, and a good picture of a large cornice. So lots of big cornices still hanging in there. In terms of our month of March, we saw, I'll show you the weather. So here we're looking at the HN24, which is our 24-hour snowfall amounts. And down on the lower horizontal axis, you can see the date. And then up on the left here, you can see the snowfall amount. So as far as the month of March went, we actually had a pretty dry month. Generally, March is like one of our snowiest months of the year. And we had some little systems come through, but nothing too significant until really the end of the month here. So what that meant for us is things stayed relatively cool. We didn't see, we saw a couple of warm-ups, but nothing too significant. And a lot of those cornices held in there. And we are still dealing with like very much a winter snowpack on those north aspects. Quite a few melt, freeze, and sun crusts on the solar aspects, but everything stayed dry on the north so far. So I remember last month we were talking about a transitional snowpack, and we're definitely still in that transitional snowpack right now.
Right. Just before we finish, I thought for March, it was a bit slightly less snowfall than usual for March, it sounds like. How about for the season to date? Because, you know, the lower elevations feel fat in some ways, but it hasn't actually been a heavy snow year, has it?
It's been pretty average. Actually, a little bit more than last year, which is surprising because I remember last year at this time of year, we're all looking up at the peaks thinking how good they looked.
Yeah.
But a little bit more snowfall than last year. But I think the big caveat there is that we've seen a lot of wind. Here's a picture of what the Hector Glacier looked like 2 weeks ago. You can see the bare ice up there on the summit block. I think that's changed a little bit in the past few weeks. I've heard that the past couple of snowfalls with very little wind has helped that, with maybe like 30 or 40 centimeters on top of that ice, but still pretty bare for sure up high.
Yeah, nice. I don't want to take you off topic here, but you had mentioned just how last month we talked a lot about transitional snowpack and what that means. And basically it's, you know, everyone has a vision of what the spring Rocky snowpack is, where things are fairly stable and like cohesive, and you're really worried about daytime warming or new snow instabilities, as opposed to midwinter when we're worried about those persistent weaknesses and deeper persistent weaknesses. What's going on in the snowpack these days? Like, what are some of the highlights?
So we mentioned cornices are big. One of the big thing that's happening is, you know, we are starting to see those daytime warm-ups, what we call diurnal temperature fluctuations. So as the as the day warms up, we're starting to see cornice failures. And those cornice failures are triggering deeper avalanches. So on those, particularly on those north aspects, where the snow is still dry and there's not any crusts in the upper snowpack, we're starting to see those deeper layers wake up, as it were, with larger loads, like a big cornice failure on top of them. So this is on Vulture Peak, the north aspect. And then another significant one is this one that was reported on Des Poilus. And so that's a like size 3.5 big avalanche. So it really shows you that destructive power of these cornice failures.
So basically big triggers, big cornices falling on the slope can cause big avalanches right now is kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing right now. It doesn't seem like for all of March, we weren't seeing much reactivity in these persistent layers at all, which was great. Mm-hmm. And we're not seeing it human triggered at the moment, but it seems like the cornices are able to trigger those deeper layers.
Right. I mean, on one hand, it's quite easy to avoid cornices. Don't be below them or below any slope below them, and don't be on top of them. So at least that's good. We know where the problem is, I guess.
Totally. And then the other thing with this transitional snowpack, we're talking about a dry snowpack on the north aspects, but on our southern aspects, our more solar aspects, there are quite a few crusts in the upper snowpack, and we are seeing pretty significant warmth throughout the day. So it's almost like you have both things to worry about. You got your spring daytime warming, and you also have your dry snow slab avalanches to be concerned about as well.
Right. So the key is just to have in your mind where those problems exist and how to avoid them throughout your day.
Totally. Yeah. So changing aspect by the day, those early starts are still a really good thing.
I may be jumping ahead of what you were planning to talk about, but I thought it'd also be good because I've heard a few people refer to corn skiing recently, and yeah, just what that is exactly. Like we're talking about a fairly decent crust has to develop first, right?
Yeah, so we haven't really seen, at least I haven't found any good corn skiing yet this season. So generally to have good corn skiing, the snow needs to go through like several melt freeze cycles and have quite a strong freeze in the upper snowpack. And at a perfect time of day, you get this elusive corn snow where the upper maybe 2 to 5 centimeters of snow starts to melt out. Mm-hmm. And that just provides really nice skiing on a super supportive base. But we really haven't gotten there yet this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so in some ways, we're here at the start of April, and some seasons that would be well into what we call spring and spring skiing. But this year, it just hasn't happened yet. We're just not there yet, I guess, is what we're saying, hey?
Totally, yeah. Like being out today at sunshine, it felt like midwinter. It was snowing, and we were skiing dry powder all day. And it really hasn't transitioned yet to that spring snowpack, but I think it will coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, can we just briefly talk about that, about how this sort of complicated dry snowpack of midwinter with those persistent problems, eventually that will turn to a spring snowpack where we really are just worried about daytime warming and maybe new snow and wind slab and stuff on the surface. But what sort of weather pattern do we need to go through to get there?
So periods of high pressure where we're seeing significant warming. When we see those first few warm-ups, you're going to see that avalanche forecasts go through the roof. Right. And that's because when we first get the warming, that's when these big cornices are likely to fail. That's when it's kind of going to be at its weakest, the snowpack. So we need to go through a couple of those periods at least where the snowpack becomes wet and then freezes again to get to that more spring-like snowpack. The warmth really needs to penetrate into the snowpack to solidify it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Like, is a good way to think of it, maybe to think that the heat sort of stresses the snowpack or changes things, and the snowpack goes through that stress, and after that it is more resilient and tougher.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, for sure.
I feel like I've dragged you off topic. Was there anything else you wanted to hit at before we bounce back to Marcus to see what we'll do with that elusive spring snowpack when it comes?
No, that was great. I think honestly that was everything I had to cover. So yeah.
I actually want to talk a little bit with you about uncertainty and stuff in the snowpack, but why don't we bounce back to that after we talk to Marcus about some spring choices? Yeah, Marcus. Usually in the spring, there's like all the classic Rockies objectives that people wait all year for. We already talked about the Wapta Traverse is a good one. We mentioned Hector, and we had someone online here, SW, mentioned that Hector was fat and covered on Monday. So you could skin right to the coal, which is nice. What are some other good spring objectives? They're sort of classic things people start doing.
Yeah, so let's share my screen again. Yeah, we talked about the Wapta. Obviously, that's already be going down. One that doesn't get skied as much is the Drummond Bonnet. Now, if you're probably gonna want to do that sooner than later. That's not a very good late spring. Usually by May, the lower valleys and the X is quite bad. That one's in the Chick Scott book, and it's definitely one that's not on everyone's radar because of the distance. But basically, you start at Mosquito, you go over North Molar here, and then you get up on the Drummond, ski down, and then you do this sort of, there's a bunch of smaller glaciers until you get to the Bonnet. And then the big problem with that one is the exit. The traditional exit is just going out the creek to Johnson Canyon. And then, so why I say that's one that you would usually want to get to maybe sooner than later is those low valleys often melt out. And they're very rarely traveled. I've traveled back here quite a bit, and I've never really seen all that many tracks, and you don't really have a packed summer trail exit like some of the other places. So I thought I'd mention that one because that one definitely you want to get to now.
How long does that classically take? Like, is that usually a week trip? Most people do that in 4 days. Week?
Traditionally like 7-8 days. I'm sure there's someone out there that will do it in 2 or something. But yeah, I mean, most people take about a week. It's about, I think it's just under 100 kilometers. So it's a pretty good average, about 15 kilometers a day. Usually it takes you about a day to get ready to go up onto the Drummond, and then you could get a little whiteout. It's quite technical going up this head wall, even though the glacier itself is quite small, and you just need a short window to get through it without whiteout. But to get up into it, and it is quite crevassed, and then to just get off it, you do need a little bit of a open window for weather. And then because of this lower valley travel, if you time it wrong and you're there in the afternoon and it's wet, well, it's almost no point of going. You just wait till it freezes in the morning. So that could throw off your timing too. The main thing is you want to sort of in these lower areas in the morning and get up high and sort of stay high, and then try to exit when it's cold.
Get high, stay high. That's a great rule.
Yeah. And then of course we got the classic Columbia. I haven't been up there in a while. It was looking pretty rough the last time I was up there, but that was a few months ago. I'm sure it's starting to see some snow, like the snow around the Lake Louise area at least, and 93 North has been quite heavy and wet and with low wind. That's probably why people are now saying like, yeah, it looks pretty fat on the, on Hector and Cathedral, whereas like I saw pictures from 10, 11 days ago where, it was just bare ice. So fat might be a debatable term, but I mean, they're definitely getting covered. With that said, this year I'd be a little more concerned, especially on the Columbia, with opening crevasses. Some of the initial reports from Wapta even said that there's, crevasse fields where they've been there 20 times. They haven't seen these kind of crevasse openings, and now they're there. Just because that wind has really made a highly variable high alpine environment this year. So those who haven't been to the Columbia ice field, there's most people say there's only one route up, which is the main ramp from the ice field center here. It's quite short. You do have big serac problems here. And then you have like a sort of a crevasse maze. So you sort of pick your problem. The other option is to go to the Big Bend and take the long walk up Saskatchewan. I've done that many times. Pretty boring, but pretty straightforward. And yeah, it takes like an extra half a day if you're fast. And there's, you don't have to walk under seracs the size of apartment buildings for the most part. There is a little bit of a crevasse maze just as you get onto the ice field proper, just near Castleguard. But other than that, it's generally good for like serious crevasses. There's also this like strip, you probably can barely see it on my monitor, but on the side is this moraine strip. You can actually walk on it for like 7 or 8 kilometers and not be on ice, which is kind of cool. And then obviously on everyone's radar is usually Mount Columbia itself. A long way to go for a mountain, but definitely great views. And then you got a bunch of other 11,000 footers to the north here, the Twins, Kitchener, and Snow Dome, which is pretty popular. And people are starting to day trip a lot of this stuff. Even Columbia is starting to get day tripped. I know Joel said in the chat there that a lot of people are doing Wapta in a day this year to avoid the hut situation. So we might start seeing, I mean, there's no huts on Columbia, but as people move into that more modern style, we probably see some more single day pushes to some of these summits, which is kind of cool. And then there's the classic super far away fresh fields, which is super cool, but most people helicopter in. So you can sort of see this gray line along these peaks. That's the border, Banff on this side and BC on the other. So there are some places here that a helicopter will drop you off on the BC side and you get to ski down and make camp. Super cool environment, but quite remote, quite hard to get a helicopter back out. So a lot of people do go out via the Wapta. So they ski down to Mestalla area and sort of go out Bow or sometimes even Pado, depending on where you want to park a car. But really cool environment, super kind of isolated, but a little bit more serious. But for people that have been up Columbia or Wapta lots of times, this is definitely kind of like the next step. Super steep skiing, short pitches, but super cool skiing, lots of seracs and stuff like that. So somewhere
I can see the fresh field getting more and more popular for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Steep skiing, but like you say, really approachable. So for people that are looking for that, I mean, it's can be seriously gnarly up there, but
yeah.
also, more approachable lines. So yeah.
So yeah, those, as far as like the big ice fields. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, jumping back to Columbia there for a second. It's often you look at Columbia in March and all the faces, it just looks bare, and you're like, oh, it's not gonna happen this year. Like it's just blue ice. It's gonna be a horrible spring up on Columbia. But then, like you said, the weather turns. It gets a little warmer. We get a couple storms without wind, and things start sticking. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else has been up there recently. Throw in the chat your observations, because we were all saying before this that none of us have actually been up that way yet this year. We kind of think it's turning, but any beta from there. We also said the same about K Country. So if you have any beta about K Country, throw that in too. Yeah, sorry to short circuit, Marcus. What else were you looking at there?
That was like it for really the for the big ice fields. Like those are kind of what the people I've been talking to are. That's what they're like looking to do and I hope to get into. And those are all pretty classic ice field kind of objectives. I mean, outside of that kind of stuff, there's people start looking for those steep, bigger lines in the Rockies as we transition. I don't think we're there yet. I think we might be stalled out a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, as we get into like sort of a melt freeze, all these bigger faces that you're scared to go on all year. Now they're, getting close to ice or corn or whatever you want to call it. I'm not really going to go into too many of those, but like the classic ones are like, maybe Victoria, Collier, 3-4 Couloir and Moraine Lake will probably see tons of traffic once the road is plowed. Maybe even before that, up on Fay Glacier. I don't know can you see my Google Earth now? Did it switch?
Well, it's maybe, I don't see it yet, but
anyway, so if you don't know where those places are, if you go up to Moraine Lake, there's the Quadra and Fay, and there's a Neil Cogan hut up there. And basically it's just these almost like glacier rampart kind of mountains with all these couloirs in them. Those get skied quite often. Once they plow the road into Moraine, so people can bike up. And then.
And when do they plow that again, Marcus? Is that like start of June?
No, they usually plow it like mid-May. End of May, they'll start to look at plowing it to get prepped. And then, like late May, early June, the road will open. The road there is conditional on the eastern slide paths of Temple. So there's quite a large slide path that actually goes up and over. If you've ever been up there in the winter and you're cross-country skiing, there's literally, it's where they stop like track setting the cross-country ski line. And then there's a sign that says this is Avalanche terrain. So it's not far from the lake itself. It's like maybe a K or two. I'm not 100% sure, but it's like within throwing distance. So once that's cleared to be open for avalanche safety, then they'll plow it, and eventually they'll open it probably like a week later. So there's like this magical little window where you can get up to Moraine with a bike. There's some really awesome ski descents. Like last year we did Temple Southwest face. So if you know the scrambling route, if you're going up the scrambling route and you look to your right, there's just this big massive ball. There's a few cliff bands in it. If you get lucky, those cliff bands are filled in and you can just ski the whole face, which is quite glorious. Or if you get unlucky, like me, you'll ski it in frozen sun cups and you have to down climb all the cliffs. That's a great one.
Skiing keeps going, like, you're talking about end of May there and then into early June even. So we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, there's still a long season. I mean, last year I think I skied until late July before I said it wasn't worth my time. I mean, that gets more difficult, and then we're definitely talking about hiking for very few turns, and icy turns. But yeah, Moraine Lake's a great one. Even now it'd probably be skiing quite good as long as you weigh the risks. Constellation Col, that area has some great runs off the backside of Bell. A lot of people don't go there. But yeah, there's a lot of very long runs that soon will come into shape once that corn thing starts happening, those cell faces. And then it's just playing the aspects and figuring out which aspect goes and what's the biggest line I can get away with, kind of thing.
Yeah, which kind of sets us up nicely for that talk we wanted to have, Zoe, just about why people wait until spring for those bigger, well, we call them big lines in the Rockies. What we mean by that, I think, is like more high consequence lines where getting an avalanche really is not possible or like not an option.
Totally.
And I'm trying to set up here like why we wait till spring to do that. There are periods midwinter where there's low avalanche hazard, and the bulletin will say 3 times low. But generally, people don't go ski the north face of Stanley, say, or the north face of Victoria. Then,
I can go from there for sure. I mean, if anyone's ever taken an avalanche course in the Rocky, you've heard the terms high probability, low consequence. And that's just what we live by in the Rockies for most of our winter.
You mean low probability, high consequence?
I do, yeah. Thanks for catching that. And what we're talking about there is generally like our deeper layers. They're really hard to forecast for. There's a lot of uncertainty around them. And that's just something that exists with a dry snowpack in the mountains we have pretty much all year round. And that's the reason why we wait till spring. We're waiting for that melt freeze crust to be bridging the upper snowpack and providing these like really bomber conditions to get out and be certain that those deeper avalanches aren't going to occur in extreme terrain.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that kind of covers it in a way, but I was just trying to really drive home that fact that that if it's rated low midwinter or even moderate low, great. We all go ski things, you know, that are bigger and maybe steeper and stuff too. But some of those things that we truly are extreme descents and some of those bigger lines that a lot of Rockies skiers wait all year for. That's why we're waiting until spring. And it really comes down to that certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, low avalanche hazard means avalanches are unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to go into terrain where any avalanche would be, you know, tragic, then you're really waiting for not just to be low probability of happening, but like more certainty that it's not going to happen. And that's kind of what spring usually affords us.
Yeah, like even a small avalanche in extreme terrain can have a lot of consequence is the other thing. So
yeah, right. And you guys deal with that sunshine a lot, actually. Is that a lot of your terrain is the type of terrain where smaller avalanches would cause a big problem. Like I'm thinking of Wild West, some of the South Side chute entrances and stuff. So you probably treat those a little differently than the bigger slopes where, you know, a size 1 avalanche on a big broad slope is not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot more consequence there. So we're generally mitigating those smaller avalanches in the more consequential terrain for people so that they don't find it themselves. Yeah.
Nice. I just saw a comment roll through because I was talking about Stanley with you that most people don't go ski that midwinter. Diamond here was saying it was skied the southeast face. Southeast face. Oh, you mean whimper. Diamond, if you hear us there, maybe throw back in. You don't mean the southeast face of Stanley. We were talking about the northeast face being the big classic spring descent, and it usually gets a feeding frenzy on it once it's in shape, but most people avoid it for most of the winter just for those reasons we were talking about.
I believe actually Stanley's been skied already.
Oh, it has?
Well, yeah, but
did it get skied in winter, or was that just recently?
A couple of weeks ago, I think. Yeah. So fairly recent in kind of midwinter conditions. So it is being done. And honestly, it's being done more than probably in the past. People are getting out and getting after things, but just understand the risk there. And there should almost be this caveat in the Rockies where deep persistent slab avalanches may be possible in the right extreme shallow snowpacks that we do have if you seek them out. So
yeah, that's a great way to put it. Anything else from the avalanche world that you had lined up for us that we need to hit on, or did we catch most of your points?
I think that was everything. Nothing that comes to mind. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that kind of, Joël, I don't know if you've been following the chat there, but there's a message here saying that Gary Untersinger skied a different line on Stanley than usual, and you're usually.
I think he skied something that's like the scramble route from the summer trail, like on the southeast face. From what I kind of gather on the north face of Stanley is like most groups so far, unless like something like recent happens. Sorry, I'm gonna turn my notifications off because it's really annoying. Is that the glacier approach was really spooky, but you know it's always spooky. You have to go up and around Nemesis, and then hit a huge roll on the glacier with a bunch of crevasses. So yeah, I think most parties. I haven't heard of anyone kind of going on the north face of Stanley yet, but I know a bunch of groups tried, and like everybody turned around somewhere on the glacier or at the base of the glacier or something like that. So yeah, the kind of the descent that Gary did was on the backside of that, towards like south facing, I guess, like on the scramble route. Back in the last kind of green brick spell before we started, like probably like early March, you know, when we had those 2 weeks early March of really good stability and like nice kind of sunny days and high pressure. So yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, we're getting some messages here that the north face of Stanley's definitely been skied 2 weeks ago, kind of like Zoe was saying. Oh, and Christian skied it mid-March, but Christian's gnarly. Just looking at what else has been getting skied, Joël. Actually, that was something we want to talk about tonight. It's just sort of at the shop. You get all
well, you know, minors. Yeah, everything that's like around town has been skiing quite a bit. Like for it's I don't know if people remember like last year with the lockdown, lots of people in Canmore were skiing the bowls and Rundle and like the Ship's Brow kind of bowl and like Lawrence Grassy and a bunch of stuff, and that seems to have been done quite a bit this year already as well. Specifically minors, the Escouloir right above town. If you do minors and you want to hit the steeps, it's a great line, especially if you top out on the ridge. It's very atmospheric, kind of cool ambiance up there. Lots of people have been going up the next bowl over right along kind of Ship's Brow / sort of Lawrence Grassy shoulder. It's actually quite mellow. It's by a little Bobby onside, I think, area kind of thing. You can go up like, Skinner's right up that bowl, and that's been skied quite a bit. And, I think we've seen a lot of traffics on like all the kind of lesser dangerous lines. Amer's been skied a ton, Cobra's been skied a ton on Temple. Kefren, Patterson, there's a bunch of really good kind of intro, less objective hazard maybe lines that are still, no fall terrain that have been kind of going down. And it's the time of the year where you start seeing kind of the NAR getting skied, like East Face of Bell, and there's going to be a lot more, I think. But
East Face of Bell, a first descent?
It's tricky, right? Maybe.
I think it is. Like I assumed it was anyhow. Yeah.
I'm of the. I do like when you talk with those Gary and Andrew Wexler and the guys who ski a bunch of stuff, and they all say like in the Rockies you always assume something's been done before. I think taking it that way is probably the best way. It's the first reported descent of East Face of Bell, but
that's a good way to put it. Actually, yeah, the first.
There's probably very little people who know that, Rory McFarlane, who works in Waterton, skied the East Face of Temple years ago, right? And people would think it's a first descent if you don't search for it. So there's like a bunch of other stuff that got skied before and 20 and 30 years ago that we just don't know about because there was no Facebook back then. So it's always an interesting debate. But yeah, maybe other than that, like what else? Like Burgess North Face. If you like using a rope, it's a beautiful line, super atmospheric. That's been done a ton the last couple of weeks. There's an ice anchor. Time to hit the classics, Northeast Face of Victoria, like we were saying. And even like if you maybe like a run that I think a couple guides have done even last week is if you're not interested into steep skiing, but you like glacier skiing, the views from the Northeast Glacier on Vic are crazy. It's a really cool, mellower run with a lot of holes, but that's a beautiful line to ski on that shelf on Victoria, like before you hit the Northeast Face. Yeah. I think Ken Belanger got that like last week, and the coverage seemed relatively good. And you ski back down to the tea house; it's super scenic, and there's so much kind of like awesome terrain up there in that area.
Yeah, totally. It feels like big country when you're back there for sure. Like that's a really impressive place, and like you say, really beautiful and historic. You end up at the lake. That is a nice way. Anything else for the people that aren't getting NAR? Can you think of anything like? I like that people that are thinking of first descents probably have them in mind, but maybe something for those that are.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and we've been lucky. Like I was saying, I've got friends over this week, so we've been skiing kind of like classic kind of scenic loops, and we've had like awesome conditions on Top Hat. We've got awesome conditions on Surprise Pass with the bonus line, like on that kind of Skinner's right, skiers left on the way down Surprise Pass. Like Whimper's been skiing super well too. Like all the kind of those kind of classic sort of spring, longer 1,000-meter lines have been like seeing a lot of traffic. Top Hat this year has been skiing a lot, but like all that stuff's been great. Cathedral, maybe like that's someone was saying that there was snow now on Hector, and it seems like Cathedral kind of went from like, oh, it's a sheet of ice to, oh, there's enough snow to ski in like a week's time, right? So Cathedral's been super good. Good reports from Field as well the last couple of days. Someone was on Field on Monday, I think we talked to in the shop here, and said the skiing was very good in the Alpine. So lots of variety right now, and I think we're lucky for April that there's such good coverage down low still, and it's kind of cold, and we get all those pulses of fresh snow.
Yeah, totally. Actually, Field was a good one. I was gonna recommend for people that maybe aren't looking to get rad, but looking for a big spring day. Marcus, do you have like one or two to add there that like I'm guessing there's people on here looking to make use of the good spring stability that's going to be coming our way. what are there like some classic one day instead of the 7-day traverses we've been talking about? Is there something that comes to mind? Do you think would be a good day?
I mean, Joel got a lot of them, but you're gonna have to give me 5 minutes.
Right.
I'm thinking of the ones that Joel haven't mentioned.
Some other, like on the Wapta, like Mount Gordon can be done in a day, and that's a really nice, like mellow rundown, nothing crazy, but beautiful views. A little bit deeper, but Olive as well is a beautiful day trip. St. Nick.
Yeah, the Ronda Hable, if you go to Peyto, that's got a bunch of different exposures as well, and like different steepness. I know that from what I saw, I think there was a really interesting report for the Wapta that the approach to Peyto was quite rocky and wet, but that's kind of normal. Kananaskis, I don't know, and that's one of the things we were talking about before jumping on, is that that typically April is the time where south face of Smuts starts getting into corn, those kind of big solar faces in Kananaskis, like Galatea and all that do get skied, but I haven't gotten eyes on it. So I don't know if people have been skiing Kananaskis, can maybe comment how that's looking, because what
a couple of comments in there just that it was skiing really good last week when it got that new dump. And Dave, if you got a second there, you did the French Hague Robertson. That might be like the classic 1-day traverse for people looking to get into a bit of glacier travel but not ski anything ridiculously steep. Like the French Hague Robertson's a really good line.
Yeah, it was lovely on a Saturday, or on Saturday when we went, when it was pretty bare. But of course, you know how that works. You go back to work on Monday, and the next thing you know, there's another 10 centimeters of snow on it. So there was quite a lot of commentary about it in the chat. So I really recommend people take a look at that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably good. Hey guys, we feel like we've given some people some steeper lines everyone's looking at. Christian, if you're out there still, feel free to chirp in on the chat there on other good lines for spring. I see you did the north face of Stanley, which is a lot of people's ultimate run, of the year, if not of their few years. But these days gets done more. And yeah, you said you skied it in March there. But yeah, coming into spring, I mean, that's the classic time for, if you're a real Rockies backcountry skier, it's the time of year you wait all year for, really. And don't be fooled by the mountain bike crowd and the rock climbing crowd that the season is turning. These are the best 2 months of skiing in the Rockies usually that we're about to hit. So yeah, don't lose motivation, team. Hey, Joël, before we go, I got one or two house cleaning things to end with. But before we do, what's new around the shop other than that you guys have tripled square footage and have all the space? You talked already about some of the new services you're going to be adding and stuff. But anything else coming your way, events wise or anything like that?
Not a ton of events, right? It's the time that we get up really early to go skiing, so then we're too tired to organize stuff. Well, in town it's transitioning slowly to summer. I think one of the big things we've been discussing with a lot of people in the store the last maybe week and a half has been just kind of preparation for that kind of like gnarlier terrain. I know with you, Kevin, we had that like little kind of crevasse safety sort of like review one night, and it had everybody at the shop like go home and like empty their climbing gear boxes and make sure they have all the gear they needed. And that's something we talk about a lot right now, is like, make sure that all the gear you carry on your glacier you're going to use for something, and that you have all the stuff you need. It didn't end up in your climbing box and you're going to forget it. Same with like the kind of technical gear that right now is moving a lot. Like if you need a pair of crampons or an ice axe or that kind of stuff for April and May, this will get exciting for this availability very soon. And yeah, like just I think it's we were talking last month about kind of it's the time for ski crampons and kind of dialing in your gear before it fails. And I think April is the time for like making sure all your technical skiing equipment is in good shape and you have everything on the harness when comes time to hop on a glacier or something.
Yeah, and we should probably revisit what you said last time, because last time you told us all to wax our skins and make sure your skis were waxed and tuned so they, as the snow got sticky with spring, they wouldn't all be globbing. And 2 weeks later, I was fully out, and half of our group had, you know, skins globbing with snow all over them, and no one had wax with them. And then one guy had skis that hadn't been tuned all year, and sure enough, he was getting snow stuck to his bases. And I was thinking, oh yeah, Joël warned us about this. So that's still going on. So if you're going out in the next few weeks, this is the time to worry about that. Make sure your skis are waxed and your skins are waxed, and you have all that.
Yeah, and just like, you know, yeah, all the gear, you know, the ski crampons, it's going like crazy right now. Yeah, it's like equipment wise, and I think like the other thing that we've been hearing a lot about, and it's kind of funny, but lots of people got into like little kind of like slough avalanches problems on couloirs the last kind of couple of weeks. And that's one of the things that as a like even with the staff we've been discussing is kind of like the overhead hazard and what that means. And like, even, you know, right now we're having a pulse of snow very often, and lots of people get caught in like, you know, head walls full of snow, and then like whoop, they get like, you know, caught in a little avalanche because it's coming down from a wall or something. So like we've been talking about like safety and efficiency even with the staff here, and just like watching out for overhead a lot, and like, you know, on a non kind of gear related topic.
Yeah, that's good. And Zoe, I might need a little backup here in a minute, but there's sort of maybe two soapbox moment or things we should talk about here. Christian's brought up one wisely, and but maybe Joël, what you're talking about first is sloughing in couloir. So we often say this is couloir season, although couloir season's all season now in the Rockies, but because we think the snowpacks below our feet gets more reliable as the winter or as spring goes on. So we think good time to go ski a couloir. But anytime there's stuff overhead, a couloir really is just a funnel that increases the consequence of a small avalanche. So even 10 centimeters of new snow, if you're in a couloir, is a big deal. You know, it might not be a big deal if you're out skiing a big face and the snow can spread out. So yeah, just keep that in mind. There's times in the year when we think of couloirs even as being safer because they might not have some of the deeper persistent layers because they continually slough, but they also continually slough, which means every time there's new snow or things warm up above you, you're in the firing lane as it all comes down the mountain.
The other thing with cornices or with couloirs would be cornices as well. Generally, you're going to have a cornice build up over top of most couloir features. And how big is that cornice? What's the likelihood it's going to fail? They're one of the hardest things to predict in snow avalanches. So thinking about that, like a good example would be like Aymer couloir has that big east facing slope above it that would get the morning sun pretty easily. Yeah. And think about if that slope starts to slough and then comes down into the couloir, what's the consequence? Well, it's pretty big. It's a pretty big feature. So
totally. Yeah. And it all gets channeled right at you. So even a avalanche that isn't huge would be a big deal. So yeah, I wonder if as a community we've lost that awareness with couloirs a bit, because we have sort of, I think in the last 5 or so years, learned that some of the things we're often scared about in the Rockies are less prevalent in couloirs, and maybe that's led to a bit too much comfort with them, because they are terrain traps. On your AST1, you'll learn that a terrain trap is anything that increases the consequence of an avalanche, and that's a couloir in a nutshell. So.
And the other thing with slough is it'll run really easily on these melt freeze crusts and harder surfaces that we have in the spring. Like today was a great example of it. There wasn't very much slab property within the new snow, but you could give it a little kick and the whole of the new snow would just fly down the melt freeze crust. So that's something.
It would go a lot further. You mean out into the runouts?
Yeah, out and train down and gain more mass on the nice hard surface.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point. And then we'll just touch on Christian's point here, and it'll lead to some other stuff. Just that, you know, as we talked about, it's still a winter snowpack, but even as the snowpack becomes a spring snowpack, there's, you know, wind slabs form any night that there's wind and loose snow to blow around. That's just a constant. That doesn't go away with spring. Very thin areas that then become covered with snow, or melt freeze crusts that become covered with snow, are their own avalanche hazards. And maybe they're not huge avalanche, like they don't produce huge avalanches, But if people are starting to move into more extreme terrain, more steep skiing terrain, the consequences are real and like really big. So, you know, as much as we want to hype the go, it's spring, get all those big lines you want, let's be honest that they come with a higher level of consequence. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the point. Just
And I think another thing to go with that, Kevin, a lot of people don't see the nuances that go into skiing these big lines, like how many weeks they've been studied and how extensively they've looked into the conditions in that area. A few months ago, Marcus was talking about gaining confidence in an area, and that still is a very true thing in spring. So looking at an area, studying it, gaining confidence in the area, probably skiing smaller objectives around that area before committing to that bigger line. And that's a big part of it too.
yeah, great point. If I think back on, you know, there was a time when I loved to ski all the biggest lines in the Rockies, and that was my goal every year. And especially early on in that progression, there were at least half the time were turnarounds. You know, you would go, it's my window is Wednesday next week, and you would go to check out Amer Couloir. And it took me 6 years till I finally skied Amer Couloir, you know, from my first attempt until the time I finally did it. And that's just normal. So if you're out there hoping to ski the North Face of Stanley this year, or Amer Couloir or Victoria or something, yeah, it's just part of the process. You got to be ready to turn around.
You're going to see the success on Instagram. You're not going to see the turnaround posts. So remember that.
And yeah, we're kind of lucky this year, like in a way, you know, sometimes in April, but by early April, you've already got like melt freeze and you're already like rushing before there's like no snow in Valley Bottom and stuff. And this year, like personally, like, or, you know, when I chat with some people who have like, you know, who are looking at stuff, it's like, oh, like, you know, it's still kind of winter, like Christian talked it, like just said it in the chat, but, you know, it feels like winter up high a lot still. So it's like, oh, patience, like, you know, it's going to be maybe more of a late April, May for a lot of stuff even this year. So I think keeping motivation late in the season is going to be important this year, especially if we keep getting those pulses of snow. So
yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Christian, thanks for your insights there. And I mean, Nicholas brings up a good point here, mate. We're getting close to ending, so maybe this will be the last thing we touch on before Dave gets going. But just Nicholas was mentioning that the freezing level is forecasted to go up high, and we'll see if that materializes. Hopefully it doesn't. But just, yeah, spring in general is all about early starts and getting done. The bulletin will drive this home too. If you're reading the bulletin, it's, you know, early start, early finish, because as daytime warming, you know, peaks around early afternoon, late afternoon, you sure don't want to be below any south faces. You don't want to be below any cornices, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, early starts, early turnarounds, and never be afraid to turn around in the spring. As soon as, yeah, Marcus, I don't know if you have a last couple sentences about this, but like, mid-season, we're often going out to find turns. You know, we go to a zone and we just look for the best skiing. We do some laps and have a great day. Spring seems to be a shift where a lot of people kind of turn towards objectives, and that is, we're doing this traverse, we're doing this loop, we're going to get this peak or this couloir. It's just a bit of a different mindset, and it just means you have to be ready to turn around more, I think.
Yeah, and speaking to Zoe's point, is like, a lot of the skiing I often do in spring is like stuff I was watching all season. And so like I might be going out and skiing some yo-yo laps in this area. You know, I'm taking that picture of that thing that, oh, that'd be cool if that came in later. Or how is that reacting? Has it avalanched already? Is it super thin? It just looks thick. Like what's the story behind the lines? Like, I think it's something that a lot of skiers develop over time, but when you're new to it, you don't quite grasp it. Like, you know, you just, oh, it's spring, it's getting better, I'm going to go ski that gnarly line because I have the technical ability to do so. But for me, it's all about that, like, what is that story of that line? What did that line go through this year? Is this like, did it avalanche multiple times and it looks fat, but it's actually just like super thin and I'm going to hit rocks? Or is it actually super fat? Like, and by going out, like you say, like during the season and skiing all these little areas, you can have your eye on that. And I'm always taking pictures. That's something I tell people all the time. Like, you're out, just take pictures of terrain constantly, because then you create your own, database. Like, what is that? Oh, this year when Wexler skied the east face of Cascade, like I remember like a week before he skied it, I messaged him. I was like, hey, like the east face of Cascade's looking sweet. Like I've been watching it for 10 years. I have pictures. I can go back and look. And he was like, yeah, it does look sweet. And then they went and skied it because they have been doing the same thing, right? So like all those skiers with a long history of getting into that bigger stuff, they're actually doing a lot more homework than that like single Instagram picture. That's the result of like crazy amounts of work. And just like you skied, like, yeah, you took 6 years of ski aimers, like there's lines here that I've been watching for 10 years that finally I ski it because I know that thing's going to kill me if I get it wrong. I want to be as sure as I can. And the only way to be sure is to like know that line story from the season and what it's gone through. So I think that's really important kind of to bring home.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good point. Thanks. We're going to hand it over here to Dave after one more message, but is there anything else you guys want to add? Anything we're missing from any of you three?
Yeah, well, Kevin, I saw that you guys had a bunch of like steep and deep kind of like guided days. Do you still have a couple of resources for people who want to get into more technical skiing, or is that kind of the end of the season for NTN?
Yeah, no, for the guiding operation, we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up at this point. If people have specific things they're interested in, especially glacier travel courses, actually we're still organizing private ones of those for groups of 4, but that's pretty much it for our little area. But thanks for the pitch, Joel. I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess the last thing we wanted to see, I don't see a bunch of questions in the chat. So last thing, just before we end tonight, I think it's only right if we take a moment just to acknowledge that there was a fatality in the Rockies in the last week. On Monday, there was a fatal avalanche on Mount Hjertaas, and I'm sure there's, of the 60, 70 people here, I'm sure there's people who knew Spencer Postman, and I'm certainly friends with a bunch of the people that were involved that day. A very traumatic day, very tragic, and really sad. So we don't want to just talk about all the good stuff and what's great about backcountry skiing. We need to also recognize that there can be big consequences, and those guys were in extreme terrain for sure. But a lot of things we talked about tonight are extreme terrain as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think the only thing I'd add to that is just it's really good after an accident. Everyone wants to know what went wrong and dissect how they would stay safe in the same situation, and often that leads to trying to think about what could have been done differently, and I would just really discourage that for a while. There is just a certain amount of uncertainty we deal with, and when we move into terrain of that nature, that's part of the risk. And yeah, it's really sad. If anyone out there knew Spencer and wants to add anything in the chat box there, please do. Or if you're keen to talk, feel free to unmute and jump in. But I think it's important that we recognize that. And I didn't know Spencer, but he's a keen backcountry skier. He's part of this community that we're rallying here every month. So it's only right that we give him a little acknowledgement. And I don't know, I wish I had better words for it, but at least we talk about it. Yeah, with that, Dave, what do we got to do to wrap up here tonight?
I don't think there's anything else really, Kevin. This is going to be our last Snowpack update for the 2021 season, isn't it?
Yeah, thank God. I'm really keen for next year.
It's hard to get organized. I'm like sitting here in my running gear and I'm looking at my lawn thinking that I need to be raking it or something this weekend. But it's really great to hear all of your encouragement, to get out and keep skiing, because boy, there's got to be at least another good 4 to 6 to maybe 8 weeks, depending on where you go and how much hiking you're prepared to do.
Oh yeah, I think there's a solid 8 weeks this year. And yeah, before we close off though, we really should thank the group. Hey, like
Yeah,
Marcus,
I think that's important.
yeah, Marcus, thanks for all your efforts this year. It's been you've showed up for what, 2 years in a row now, every month during the ski season, and you're a guy that sells guidebooks and makes a living that way, and but also just has so much data to share with us. We're very lucky to do that for free. So thank you for joining us all this time, Marcus.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me.
Joey, who's been volunteering so much over time too, and like giving us all the underground secret beta of sunshine. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no, that was my next one. Yeah, thank you, Zoe. We really appreciate your expertise and your in-depth knowledge with what's going on there. I think it really adds to everyone's understanding of especially where we're at with the season. You as a professional seeing it every day, I think that really helps the rest of us. So thanks so much for showing up every month this year. We're stoked you did it.
Lots of nice comments showing up in the chat box, and it's been a real privilege for me because I'm not a super experienced backcountry skier or tourer, so it's been a real privilege for me to be able to sit in on these nights and listen in. And anytime you see me doing this, it's because I'm writing stuff down, so I know what to do in the upcoming weekend. So but thanks to everyone everyone who's been on the panel this year. We really appreciate all your hard work. And I think special thanks goes out to Joël and Gavin, of course, at SkiUphill for making these happen. There's a little bit of work, a little bit of investment that goes into sharing this information. And I think that they've been great about sharing this, and to Gavin as well, who's been, he's making sure that I record these and editing them, of course, so that they can go up on Facebook so that you can see them later. So just a reminder, some changes at the shop. Of course, physio and massage services are going to be available very shortly. And for those of you who are starting to think about your off-season training, of course, trail running starting very soon. So make a point of popping into the shop and get the gear you need to start getting ready for summer training. Other than that, thanks again. My name's Dave Robertson. I'm a writer in Calgary. It's been a real pleasure being able to sit in on these panels, and looking forward to seeing everybody next year. Thanks.